invite him to start to share his depth of knowledge. And it's important to tell you that this gentleman has been studying organizational resilience for the last 15 years or thereabout. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubt in my mind that there's going to be a very good time of learning, knowledge, and understanding. Now, before you come on board, well, it's already in the room and is raring to go. But was it yesterday that it was a memorial of one of our friends, a mentor, one of our brothers, a great entrepreneur who you can say he came ahead of his time. Yesterday was the 21st, I hope I got that right, of the anniversary of the passing of Abiodun Ogunkomi, the founder and the CEO of Cornerstone Insurance PLC. And I'm not doing this because his widow is here right on this platform and she's joined us from time to time. But I think it's just fair to celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, to celebrate commitment to excellence, to celebrate his humanity of a gentleman who you could easily say, came ahead of his time. Ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, I want to celebrate the spirit of this departed brother of ours for all that he represented and all that he has contributed. The company that he founded is publicly quoted and they're still doing very well. It's also my pleasure to welcome their sister. I hope we'll have an opportunity to say hi to us, maybe during the program or after. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's Dr. Osaren Emokpae, who is going to be taking us on the third segment of organizational resilience. The critical thing is that how is it organizations too big to fail? Are they too big to fail? And it's amazing. He's been taking us through the theoretical framework of resilience as well as practical application, not only for the business environment alone, but also for the non-for-profit, particularly people from the faith community and ministry leaders. Once again, Dr. Emokpae, you're welcome.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pastor Joe, for this opportunity once again, and also for remembering our beloved brother who was with us and left 24 years ago. I remember we were in the same finance committee of Foursquare at that time. It was a period when our daddy, Reverend Farumbi, was the general overseer of Foursquare, and and I was fortunate to have been nominated to be a member of the finance committee, and our brother was also a member of that committee. Well, we missed his contribution because I think God needed him most in heaven. So we give God glory for what has happened and for the legacy that he left behind. So I'm going to be starting this. I was reflecting on the first two episodes that we have had on organizational resilience. And I found that I didn't quite connect what this platform is about and what I was teaching. Because this platform is about business sustainability, and that is why it's called Touchstone Business Sustainability Series. I'll be speaking on organizational resilience. In some way, giving a broader frame beyond organization to even come into personal resilience. And I did say that some schools of thought will say they are interchangeable. Organizational resilience, business sustainability, they are really not true. That is not true. It depends on the prism you are using, it depends on the perspective you are looking. And what I thought to do proper justice to this platform is that I should actually today start from what is business sustainability? What are the components? What are the ingredients? What are they? And how do you connect them with organizational resilience? Now, if you look at what Proverbs 24, verse 16a said, he said, for a just man faileth 7 times and rises up again. For a just man falleth 7 times and rises up again. Here, if you want to understand the word just, a just man, if you want to understand that just means who deploys godly principles. That's what, when you talk about justice, you talk about just a person in the scriptures. Is someone who deploys godly principles and godly wisdom to run their lives, including their businesses. I must apologize. I think some people try to get me on phone. I want to switch the phone off. It's going to be off now. And I remember Pastor Joe has warned me before I should switch off my phone before I start. So it's switched off now. I'm sorry about that. So a just man means a person who deploys godly principles and wisdom to run his or her life. And so when you look at that Proverbs 24 verse 16, a just man falleth 7 times. How better can you describe personal resilience? It's about you fall, you can rise again. When you look at conventional literature, they don't look at the issue of when you are recovering, it said when you fall, you bounce back. That's what conventional literature will give you. But if you look at more seminal literatures that will come from some who have Christian backgrounds, some who have done deeper work on organizational resilience, they will tell you about that. It's not just about bouncing back. It's actually about getting to a better state after you are falling. And what that then says is not bouncing back, you're actually bouncing forward. And that is why when you go through, when people go through different challenges, those who are very enterprising actually turn those challenges onto turning the organization to get onto a better state, rather than returning to where that business used to be. So, as I said, I will begin today by defining what is this business sustainability that this platform is about. Talk to business, what is sustainability? And I want to also demonstrate the strategic connection between business sustainability and organizational resilience. So what is this sustainability? It is the capacity and the process. There are 2 things, mind my words, is the capacity and the process of a business to continue to operate in the marketplace, covering costs with some surplus over a period of time. So you can get it there. Is the capacity and the process of a business to continue to operate in the marketplace, covering costs. And I'm going to decompose the cost when I come to the next sentence. Covering costs with some surplus over a period of time. Why am I using surplus? Surplus because it also operates to a non-profit oriented organization like a church. And you call that surplus. You don't want to call it profit. But when it comes into business, I'll begin to walk down through you, walking you through in business, we actually what we call profit. There are 4 critical components of business sustainability. four square. If you can't remember anything, you can lift up your finger. Four square. 4 critical components of business sustainability. What are they? Number 1 is brand equity. I put that as B. So when I'm referring to B, you remember that is brand equity. And I will tell you what brand equity is about. Number 2 is operational sustainability, OS. Number 3 is financial sustainability, FS. And number 4, risk profiling, ROP. So BS is usually a function of the combination of or a mix of BE, OS, FS, and ROP. So business sustainability is usually a function for economists. I would have put an F there. I'm not going to do the YDS today. I'm going to put an F there and put in bracket. Business equity, operational sustainability, financial sustainability, and risk profile. And that's what, and I'm going to take them one by one. Interestingly, if wherever we get to today, we stop. I will be a little slow today because I'm going to be giving you concepts, and definitions, that sometimes could be a little difficult to find in the literature, in the public literature. So wherever I end, I promise you by next Saturday, I will complete, I will quickly run through and then give us some takeaways. Now, what is operational sustainability? Operational sustainability is continuing business transactions, covering ongoing operational costs, and making contribution to fixed costs. Okay, so we take a business. Let's take Touchstone as a business. Now I'm so delighted for the progress of that business over the years. And so, in such a challenging times like this, what is Touchstone doing? What's operational sustainability? That is, all the operations, you have to pay salaries, you have to be able to buy paper, that needs to use, should be able to ensure it's paid for light bill, is able to pay. Those are operational costs. And so being able to take up this operational cost and as a little toward the fixed cost. What is a fixed cost? For instance, it could be the cost of a building with their mortgage as their head office, and all that. There's some contribution there. What you call that? You call it operational sustainability. There's no way a business can be sustainable and ultimately be resilient without first covering operational costs, without having operational sustainability. Then the next concept in financial sustainability is a strategic tool. Is a strategic organizational process that embeds covering both operational and fixed costs, making enough margins for returns to the shareholders of the business organization. Sometimes we use that when you are in the Anglo-American system. You talk about making a return to shareholders. And I think we're doing the first episode or second, actually have to show us, and we will still talk about it today. The different concepts in the way that you look at those who have interest in the business. Japanese came out with a model that's adopted in mainland Europe. And they tend to talk about stakeholders, not shareholders. But when you find between Britain and the United States of America, maybe Canada, they tend to talk more about shareholders. But the interesting thing about it is that there's actually a convergence between the two. Ultimately, if you actually want to maximize the returns to the shareholders who invest in business, you must be able to meet the needs of the stakeholders. So there's an intersection between the two perspectives taken, whether it's a Chinese perspective, or a Japanese perspective, or a British perspective. At some point, you find that they actually come together. So financial sustainability is a strategic organizational process that embeds When I say embed, it actually captures, covering both operational and fixed costs, making enough margins for returns to shareholders or stakeholders of the business or the organization. Then what is brand equity? Because I want to take them one by one. I told you, like I said, we'll be mapping this concept, take them one by one, and I'll pull them together again. You can see how they then work together and how business sustainability actually will relate to organizational resilience. Now, what is brand equity? This is a big elephant in the room. Brand equity is a strategic Oreo, and I will tell you what an Oreo means. But let me use the right term first, and I will simplify them for us. Brand equity is strategic Oreo derived from augmentation, whose perception determines commercial value customers and markets assign to a business or a product. When we talk about an Oreo, it is an intangible that surrounds a core product. And now I'm going to give you some examples to demonstrate what an Oreo means, why we call it a surround, and sometimes if I just call augmentation, but they are really not the same word, same thing. But Oreo tends to help in augmenting the core product for it to have a commercial value that is far beyond what the core product will offer. So if you have questions, you can be noting them in case that you need for me to be a little more explicit or to clarify terms that are not very clear. So now when you then talk about the Oreo derived from augmentation, who perception determine, I put perception there. Perception determine the commercial value that a customer or customers and markets. What are you talking about markets? People think markets are just marketplaces. No. A market is a group of people who patronize a product. That's what we mean by a market, for those who understand what it is in business. So it's not a physical space, it's a physical location. What you find in some physical locations are actually marketplaces. Or when we talk about church is not a building. You can have a church building. The church actually is a group of worshipers who fellowship together. It doesn't matter whether they do virtual or whatever means. They don't necessarily need to be in the same location. So an Oreo is built on a compelling proposition beyond the product core functionality. An Oreo is built on a compelling proposition beyond product core functionality. Let me explain it by using an example. Please permit me to use an example from where I caught my marketing teeth. Permit to use Lux soap so that to be able to tell her what Oreo is, what surround means, what augmentation means, and what a brand is. Let me use Lux as an example. The core functionality of Lux is to wash the body clean. That's what brought me to Lagos. You believe I came to the university, hired from university, and brought me to Lagos to do one, to become a brand manager first of Sunlight, from Sunlight to other brands. But let me talk about Lux. And what the core functionality of Lux? If you look at the soap base, what we call the total fatty matter of Lux, TFM, is essentially designed to clean the body. That's the core functionality. But you know that Lux, the difference between Lux and Sunlight is the total fatty matter, and just a little, just 4%. Whereas then, when I was the brand manager of Sunlight, it was 68% you had a total fatty matter, Lux was 72%. Both of them from the same base. And yet, Lux on a per gram basis was selling 4 times Sunlight. Why is it that two products about the same, marginal difference, and one is selling 4 times the other? Why? That is where we come on to what we call the Oreo. That's what we come on to what we call augmentation. Now, and that's what when we come to what is the compelling proposition. The compelling proposition for Lux is beauty. Beauty for who? Beauty for women. Since most women will do everything to look beautiful. So such express emotional connection beyond the core product with the brand loss, because they want to, most women want to look beautiful. There is no controversy. I'll give you two examples I just had yesterday. We do everything to look beautiful. And so in the course of wanting to look beautiful, we want to give them something they can emotionally connect with that we believe can actually enhance their beauty. And that's the core proposition of sunlight, of loves. Now, if you move from there yesterday, I was flying from Benin City to Lagos. And this one, my wife was telling me, don't go and talk about your travel yesterday from Benin to Lagos. Now, I'm not talking about the trip. I'm talking about something that is relevant for this, what we are going to be sharing today. I flew from Benin to Lagos, and there was this middle-aged woman who sat on seat 1A. I sat on seat 1B. That's of course the business class. So we're by each other. So she was always looking, and I saw her fiddling with the phone. And I just turned a bit to the left to look at her. She was looking at her own picture on the phone. She was rolling it and rolling. She was so upset with herself on her phone. And just about a week earlier, I was flying into Benin, and then I was at the business lounge or the VIP lounge in Lagos. And also there was a woman who actually was the manager for the lounge. As she sat somewhere, she was painting her eyebrow, she was painting her face, she was looking in the mirror, every time she was looking at herself, she put something a bit on her lips, and whatever was looking around. Women always want to look beautiful. And so those of us who were then brought up in marketing and in branding, how do we assess these women? How do you get across to them? So you have the core functionality of laws. We put a partisan wrapper on law to look good. And we decide a product for the world of beautiful women, party line and all those kinds of people. And so you then prey on these emotions, which are intangible things, to actually make those women to pay more, 4 times what they will pay for sunlight, that will deliver almost the same value in terms of core product. And what do you then add? The Oreo, and within that Oreo then you add a little perfume that makes it a little different from sunlight. And at the end of the day, they are ready to pay 4 times for exactly the same product base. And that's what an Oreo does. That's what branding does. So some women are obsessed with wanting to look beautiful. And so loss is positioned in the market for such women with a compelling proposition to build emotional connection. This is what plays a critical role in building brand equity and sustainable franchise. And you are going to see how I'm going to connect that with business sustainability. Sustainable franchise. What is sustainable franchise? That people will always come to buy this product through thick and thin in good and bad times. For the brand, so let me take that sentence again. Say, this is what plays a critical role in building brand equity and sustainable franchise for the brand and the commercial value to the entire value chain. So marketing communication, and Touchstone is an expert, clearly an expert in this domain, in marketing communications. So marketing communication provides a vehicle to highlight this brown surround. The brown surround is what I call the Oreo. The brown surround is what defines the augmentation. What we mean to augment the core product. The core product is just the total fatty matter, 72%. And the remaining is water. And so that is the core product. And so to put a halo around it, an Oreo around it, we call it a surround and an augmentation. You put a little perfume, you put the polyester wrapper, and you put a beautiful woman there, and then you then position and present it as a beauty solution for women who desire to be beautiful. and those who are prepared now to pay 4 times for a similar product with about the same base, because in their own head, they perceive it will make them beautiful. And so let me move on. So it is brand equity that defines the emotional connection between a business and its customers. I've used that example that enables the organization to be patronized in good and bad seasons in the product life cycle of the brand. Okay, product life cycle. I remember the short time I taught University of Lagos MSc students, I was teaching them marketing. The very first lesson I remember I shared, that was in 1995. Yes, 1995. My very first class. I asked them the question, what is the difference between a product life cycle and a brand life cycle? You know, they couldn't answer it because they only knew about product life cycle because in marketing literature, there was only a product life cycle, there was nothing on brand life cycle. So I needed to differentiate it, and the students were so excited. Why? I was able to do it because I was actually bringing practice, to combine with, with theory to be able to make a differentiation. But today, I don't think that is the important thing. Maybe in future, we can treat the difference between what is a product life cycle and a brand life cycle. Now, brand equity is the backbone of the cash flow of the business. If you want a proper cash flow, it depends on the brand equity, because that's what actually connects to the emotions of these people and wanting to buy your product as against others in the marketplace or in the market. Cash is the lifeblood and the king in organizations. And for you to actually desire sustainability, your cash must be healthy. And what is it that provides the cash flow is the brand equity that does it. Some people call it brand assets, but I will tell you because they are intangible, I prefer using brand equity as against using brand assets. Now, let me now move on to a risk profile, because I told you if you have business sustainability is a function of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I gave you about 4 things, and so let me now talk about the risk, because that was the last one, risk profiling. What is a risk? When we talk about risk profile? It is often determined by the risk appetite of the organization and its leaders. What amount of risk it intends to take in a business. Risk determines, it plays a role in the overall equation. And I'm going to be talking not just about equation, I'm talking about a means, and I will also be talking a little more about, about pulling this together. Business risk is the exposure a company or an organization has to factors that will lower its profit or lead to it to fail. Business risk is the exposure a company or organization has to factor that will lower its profit. So the kind of risk is there. When you get into a business, you need to be able to put some into what kind of risk. If I'm going to invest in a company that says, I give me 20 naira, I'll give you 40 tomorrow. You know the kind of risk you are taking doing that. And you then said, okay, there's this business been alive for 100 years. Let's talk about GE, for instance. I want to put money in there. And I've checked them for the last 100 years, and I found they are not going to go bust. I might not just actually make such a massive amount of profit, but I'm going to make this. So it depends on the kind of risk appetite that you have and the profile that you also give onto the brand, usually determined by the leaders of the business. So when you put that equation from the left and put the 4 by the right, it depends on the agglomeration of the 4, not the sum. It's not 1 plus this plus this plus this. No, it doesn't work that way. It's an agglomeration. Agglomeration is about something that you get that is irreversible. It's irreversible. So let me move on. I'll get to that point shortly. So business risk is the exposure a company or an organization has to factors that will lower its profits or lead to it to fail. Anything that threatens a company's ability to achieve its own financial goals is considered a business risk. So for organizational resilience, let me get back now. For organizational resilience, the business must be both operationally and financially sustainable. You cannot be a resilient business without being able to cover your both operational costs and fixed costs. No way, you cannot. Because resilience is a marathon. It's not just a one-off. It's a strategic movement. So for you to organize resilient, the business must be able to operate, must be both operationally and financially sustainable, as well as embedding positive brand equity and risk exposure. Is risk exposure below is cash or liquid assets? If you want to get that, maybe I should take it again so you don't get it correctly. For organizational resilience, the business must be both operationally and financially sustainable. But that's not all the story. As well as embedding positive brand equity, brand assets. And I will take you to what these brand assets are. And the risk exposure must be below. So in other words, if life itself is risk, okay? Marriage is risk. Anything you do, you're moving around is risk. I was 25 when I married, and I married a girl of 21. And people say, where are you in a hurry to? You didn't even call this woman for years. The first day you met her, I said, I'm going to marry you, and that was it. You don't think you are taking a lot of risk? Don't you think you ought to have tested her for 2 years? For those who tested for 7 years, some of them collapsed already. I didn't test anything. I just went in and I went in. That was it. So life is about risk-taking. Business is about risk-taking. But when you begin to control business, is that if you look at that risk, should the risk I've taken fail, how will it affect the business? And that is why your risk exposure set must be below your cash call or your liquid asset. In other words, your cash call is the cash that you have or near cash. If the risk you take can only wipe that out, the business can itself be sustainable. But if it goes beyond that and begin to take out of your fees cost, begin to take out of all those things in terms of the risk you take, you are not likely to have a business that's going to live long. And that then means the business resilience will be compromised. And in terms of sustainability, that business is not likely to go far. Consequently, the critical cord that connects business sustainability and organizational resilience is the agglomeration of brand equity, financial sustainability, and minimize business risk exposure that will not result to capital or business impairment or business attrition. That is when you intercept business sustainability and organizational resilience. Consequently, the critical cord that connects business sustainability and organizational resilience is the agglomeration. In other words, by the time you have the cocktail of brand equity, business, financial sustainability, minimize business risk exposure that will not result to capital or business impairment. Business impairment is something that threatens the business or business attrition. If you need to take away from both your physical, and intangible assets. And when you then get, it's something that will not take away from that, that is where the connection comes between business sustainability and organizational resilience. So what is agglomeration? I thought I should. Agglomeration is about an equation. Now, some people say it's an equation. Equation sometimes can be reversible. When you are testing the problem, you then say this is equal to this, and it can reverse. But this is really not equation that is reversible. So that's why I say it's a mix of variables and a relationships that are irreversible. Agglomeration. It's about an equation, a mix of variables and relationships that are irreversible. It's a cocktail or a mixture of critical variables. And look at that variable I said, BSE plus. And you know what P? Brand equity, financial sustainability. I say plus. And I will give you what those pluses could be. And I said I'll give you greater details on this. Now let me move on to the next. Now, components of sustainability. In the process of God coming to project, you take this 1 John 5:7-9. He said, for there are three that bear records in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit. And these three are one. We're going to see when we talk about brand, you really can't take the Oreo and the surround away from the core product. They are one. So when you use the brand wheel, it defines the brand, everything combined, agglomeration, they are one. Because you see, in heaven, you could see that one. See what the Bible talks about on the earth. And there are three that bear witness on earth: the Spirit, the water, and the blood. These three are one. Some will say they agree, but they are one. Now, how do I relate that onto branding? If we receive a witness of men, before I get to that verse 9, the witness of God is greater, for this is the witness of God which shall testify of his Son. Now, in business sustainability, if you don't have a positive brand equity, which more often than not will embed risk management, you combine that with operational sustainability and financial sustainability, then you have something that is one. That is something that will last, will actually last for years. The kind of thing that Colin Sampora spoke about, businesses that last. Can you look at the three? Brand equity that has in its womb a good risk management profile. By the time you pull that cocktail with operational sustainability, financial sustainability, you now have a business that can go on for a long time. Now, brand equity, I spoke about it earlier, is about the value placed on the Oreo. Brand equity is about the value. There's a commercial value put on the Oreo, the surround, the augmentation, that comes from the brand augmentation, which shapes the brand perception. How a brand is perceived, most times, it's not about the core product. It's always about the augmentation. It's about the Oreo. It's about the surround. It's about the surround. And this surround is the one that structures the perception of people have about such a product. And now you could actually call it a brand. So, sustainability, we move on. Sustainability in the banking, I want to focus more on banking because now I'll take you to banking. I'll come back to how it applies to business and indeed ministry. In banking, if you were to go into banking, as I've spent years now, having to work with banks. In banking, was identified in my research, and this research I worked on for about 12 years. In my research, as a function of the ability of the banks to cover costs and reserve some surplus to have recourse to in difficult situations. If you go to Augusto, Augusto it's on Lagos Island. If you go to the office, I was there to visit a couple of times when I was doing this research. I needed to look at some of their materials they had done. Augusto & Co. in 2015. Find the definition there. And sustainability in the banking was identified in the research as a function of the ability of banks to cover costs and reserve some surplus to have recourse in the cost situation. So you find is the generic definition of sustainability. It's not decomposed here. Now, if you then go that and take that down, it was also argued by Augusto & Co. that surplus provide the organizational robustness and capital to call upon during hard times, providing the avenue for boosting revenue and effectively covering costs on a continual basis over a long period of time. So that the going concern paradigm of banks will not be compromised or be impaired. And the management does not fail in mitigating risks and keeping within prudential guidelines. Those who work in banking know what prudential guidelines are. They are intended to ensure that the money we put in, all of us who have a stake in these banks, that those monies, they are not lost. They give them prudential guidelines upon which businesses are done, what should be your liquidity ratio, all kinds of things. But I don't really have time to go into the details of that. Let me move on. Now, there was a paper delivered by Dov Turner. It was one of the very seminal articles, peer-reviewed article in 2014. And in that paper, he was explaining the failure of microfinance banks and using the camel, camel, for those who are very conversant with the banks, when they use camels as, a platform to actually x-ray a bank. And what are they looking at there? Capital adequacy ratio, asset quality. Is it toxic assets or real asset? So many of our banks, they will be putting on their balance sheet, they were toxic assets. Assets that we're not going to product, you can't recover. They put it there as assets until NDIC will go into and say, but these are toxic. They really can't do anything for anyone. You are just deceiving people. And that is why some banks have to be liquidated, because there are so much toxic assets there. So when you use camels to actually x-ray your bank, you can actually see whether those banks are healthy or not, or whether they can live on. Earnings, liquidity, sensitivity to market risk, and so on and so forth. Rating to identify the financial institutions' overall health. So they want to look at the health of the bank. They want to use camels. But you see, not only a camel that is available. That's what Dr. Taylor was talking about, Dr. Taylor. Among the parameters considered in my research, which share certain similarities with the camel model, but are in some way a bit different. Based on the availability of the data that I had, how to just use assets and say quality of the assets. Okay, deposit and gross loan portfolio. Your deposits over the gross loan portfolio. In other words, what is it are your liabilities? And what is it that are your assets? Your loan that you give are asset, deposits are liabilities. What is the ratio between these two? Then operational self-sufficiency. Are you able to cover, your operational costs on an ongoing basis? What's your liquidity ratio? How much of the so-called capital that you have is liquid form, or how much of, the deposit that you have, and when you give out loans, you then have that is remaining. Are you actually keeping within the prudential guidelines and all that? So these are some of the things I considered in the research that I did. Now, to achieve both operational and financial sustainability, it requires meeting both the social and commercial goals at the same time. Of microfinance banking, and indeed in the entire banking industry. This will suggest that loans advanced must be recoverable. They are not the ones that are recoverable. And some of you should be aware of how Intercontinental Bank in Victoria Island had to be taken away from the person who built it, because he took facilities from the bank he was chairing. I won't name it. He was the chairman of the bank, took facilities. He went to build Intercontinental Bank in Victoria Island. He went to invest in all kinds of things. And NDIC had to try to recover these things. But, when you sell off what you recover, sometimes you don't really sell it out of up to 50% of the cost of the value, because you want to just get that money back for those who had deposits in the bank. So this will suggest that loan advance must be recoverable. The leading microfinance displayed transparency indicative of openness and full disclosure of accurate financial information for the purpose of independent verification. Such transparency shows that these MFB are nothing to hide. I don't want to spend too much time on that. So many of the MFB had the capacity to overcome stress and adapt to challenging circumstances were often microfinance banks that had robust governance, that actually observe the prudential guidelines as minimum. For instance, if the sell liquidity rate should be 10, I can remember I visited some banks, I interviewed their managing director, their chief operating officer, in which where they were said to maintain it, they were maintaining 20. So the prudential guidelines were actually seen as a minimum for them. Whereas in these overgeared banks, you will know, even the first bank in Nigeria, some of the banks in Nigeria, I don't want to mention them, you find their gearing ratio. They were overgeared and all that. Why? They actually went below what the prudential guideline provided. And that is just sleepwalking onto debt. If not that the central bank came to the rescue of some of these banks, they would have all been dead by now. Now, whose child you are? Can you just flip onto that page? I love this. I've been doing work on this on whose child I am. Branding builds equity, commercial value beyond core product. I've said that. For a product to become a brand, for it to be a brand, it must have a commercial value beyond the core product. Brand architecture provides the options which business leaders can choose to build a brand equity. Brand architecture, you do it like you want to build a house. It provides options from which business leader can choose. So you can choose to use this model, differentiation. You can use endorse identity. You can use master branding. I can give you two quick examples in Nigeria. If you look at Dangote, it uses the third architecture. That's what it uses, master branding. So everything about Dangote is Dangote. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. Dangote sugar, Dangote, it's just, that's the brand. That's also what NASCO does. Okay? Now, I'm not promoting them here. I'm just giving examples so you understand how to use these terms. Now, when you then see those who then use differentiation, you go to Unilever, for instance. So they say this is Lux, this is Omo. Sometimes you don't, until you go and look at the small print, you don't really know where they are from. What are they called? Those are that differentiation strategy within the brand architecture. Then the endorsed identity, you find that is mostly used. You can find that in Nestle. In other words, they use their Nestle name to endorse what they are doing. So that's why you find the culinary mangoes and all that endorsed by Nestle and so on and so forth. But let me leave that. Now, the core product, I said the options are mainly this. The core product agglomerated with augmentation-based brand power. You want to have powerful brands, there's always a core product within, and then there's always augmentation. And when they come together, the big power brand. Power brands are the ones that actually survive adversity. They are not weak brands. So the augmentation is the aureole, which is intangible. You cannot touch this, with this emotional connection with its consumers, and which enables such brand to overcome any adversity. Such is usually comprised of core product plus added values of the intangibles and the distinctives. And let me give you some of the intangibles, you can move on from there, sir, what you have in. Yeah, so you look at some of the intangibles, and there are goodwill. What can you put onto goodwill in terms of numbers? It depends on who is actually doing the evaluation. It can be done. Recall bias, brand loyalty, some retention for repeat purchase, consumer emotional connection, and overall consumer perception of the brand in the market. These are the intangibles. You can't put your finger to it. But more often than not, they are actually what make the brands to be able to survive adversity, not the core product itself. Not the core product itself. And so let me move on now. I'm looking at time. I have 10 more minutes. Okay. So power brands are usually able to overcome adversity based on their brand assets. And this aligns with the scripture about whose child you are. Whose child you are can define whether you can overcome adversity or not. Adversity or not. And when I was talking to you about a paper delivered by Professor, what's her name? The Daviren, we're talking about familiar construct that can actually embed resilience in families. Familiar. And what it means, what are those family heritage? Just a couple of, just almost maybe 20 minutes before we started this, I was we were having our family exhortation and prayer meeting. My son, my first son was the one who led us today. We have that every month. We connect in different parts of the world. Where the family come together, we do exhortation, we do prayer, we share these things, we praise God together. And he was sharing things, and he was sharing things on, we were looking at what is happiness and what is joy. What connects joy and happiness? And what indeed is it to pursue? And we're looking at that today. And so I actually could connect that to what that Daviren talked about why is it that when three people are in the same circumstance, two will take their lives and one will not. Go and check back. It's like to be from the family in which they came. And that itself is about the branding of that family. There is something tangible you can't put your finger on, but it's making this world to go on. Their values, their things that they believe in, that even the most difficult circumstances they are able to overcome. It's the same thing you find. That's why the Bible said it. Whose son you are, young man. 1 Samuel 17, verse 58. So asked him, David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. And so when they talk about Jesus today, they say, if you go to Israel, I visited Israel, we've been there to do mission conference, we've been there on visit, and the mission conference. And It didn't say Jesus, son of David. Why are they linking Jesus to David? Eunice and Lois. Why are they linking Timothy to Eunice and Lois? Because there's something that is coming from the family, from the background, historically and familiarly. And all these in some way build equity into the man. So when you begin to look at Timothy, it's not exactly Timothy you see in the physical. And that's why when I see my general overseer talking, he said, what you are seeing, what is inside me is bigger than what you see. You might be looking at me as a smallish man, but I have something bigger inside. He's actually talking about brand equity. And, and that brings me to where we stopped last week. Where we stopped last week, that takes you to that conceptual framework, required for you to actually build resilient to microfinance. So you can go to that quickly, that figure 1 now, it was figure 2. If you remember last Saturday, I took 2 for figure 1 because figure 1 for this today. 7 more minutes. Okay, now you remember last week when we looked at this figure. Resilience, and we look at capability. There are capabilities that are proactive and reactive capabilities. Okay, now the framework. This framework, these 5 things in there, they relate to almost like grace, which actually came out of Japan. Robustness, redundancy, whatever. If any organization that has those 5, they never die. Those 5 ingredients. So they never die. Now, and then we came in here to look at institutional theory. What are we talking about building institutions? If you build clear institutions into organizations, for instance, internal audit, internal control, those are what we mean when we talk about institutions. So institutional theory, you find those things within it, embedded within institutional theory, whether it's neo-institutionalism or whatever, institutional structure, leadership, everything. Then you look at culture, the culture of a people. One of the things I really admire when I came to Lagos, yes, in my home, my father had, the second wife of my father was from Osogbo, but my father had wives from everywhere. I had Yoruba wife, Edo wives, Ishan wives, wherever they were all in our home. So we have the whole Nigeria in my home. So, but when I then came to Lagos, and I was I saw it in my home, and after Yoruba man, we lie down to greet an elder. The Benin people, we're not exactly like that. We bend our knees, we don't lie on the floor. In the East, it's different. So that's the way you also find organizations, they have their cultures. And sometimes you find a culture that can help embed resilience. There are some cultures that may not actually destroy resilience. And then also in terms of basic theories that people adopt, either you adopt the stakeholdership or the shareholdership, whatever it is that you adopt within a business in a way to anchor resilience. I have actually been able to look at all this and put together and be able to come to what I call the double bottom lines. You find in number 6 there. Double bottom line is that I'm sustainable, and at the same time, I can serve the poor. I can actually make my world better, and I also make profit for myself. That would be what we call the double bottom line. And you find it's a very difficult thing in many organizations, in the banks. How do we the trade-off? How do we manage to bring something that could be a bit conflicted, that you do good, at the same time you make money from doing good? Okay, let me leave that and then come on to the emerging teams. I'll just see if I can do that in 5 minutes left. Now, from that framework I've shown you, and then the teams that then came out, how to use that framework to actually probe literature. There was the first item there. Go to the next, please. Just go to the next slide. The next slide, so we can be on the same page. I hope we are getting on. Okay, emerging teams. Now, the recent thinking of organizational resilience, being conveyed by Professor Denya, I remember I've shared with us, has been explored particularly as it relates to progressivity and defense. How do you prepare? How do you now, even after preparation, something happens beyond, how do you now defend yourself? And can you actually take any of these lenses, stakeholdership, shareholdership, to help you in the way you respond? So to investigate the role of stakeholders and regulatory institutions and practices in the lives of FMBs, the literatures and whatever. Now, an exploration of the concept of ambidexterity, there was this. And I remember I used to teach this a lot, ambidexterity, to pastors in those days, maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago and all that. I don't teach them these days, ambidexterity. You know, it just has to do with How are you able to combine several functions, and then be on the top of it all? Because some people just handle one thing and they fail. How are you able to handle complex situations? You usually find it within ambidexterity, and also dynamic capabilities, as they have the capacity not only to prosper the organization, but also for the organization to withstand shock. And if you actually have skills in ambidexterity and dynamic capabilities, that is a big study of its own. If you have these, you find usually you are able to deal with problems as they emerge. Because strategy and proactive capability provide the backup systems and resources that microfinance bank can draw upon during adversity. And that is why you need to be very conversant with these concepts and be able to deploy them within the organization that you run. Now, I had to look at, in about 9-10 years, about 69% of microfinance banks were alive and 31 died. I was interested in what those 31 that died. Some of you would know some of them, that died. One of the ones that died, you remember, the Abiola family, somebody there was a chairman of one of them that died, and it was at the time, it was the biggest microfinance bank in Lagos that died. I had to spend some time investigating all those banks. Why did they die? Those 31%. In the cause, there were several things that I mentioned. A key thing had to do with poor enforcement of CBN regulatory and prudential guidelines. That was one. So in other words, if you don't have an institution to watch over, no matter what organization you're doing, internal and external, that organization is prone to failure. If you can't self-regulate and also have external regulation, and you keep into those things, there appear to be a consensus that monitoring and performance management, that is managing by measures, can actually help in terms of resilience and can be helpful for healthy organizational practice. Now, another theme is what we call the MD mission drift. Now, mission drift is avoidable. What is a mission drift? A mission drift is this: where am I set up? And you find people tend to drift away from where they were set up, the purpose for their existence. Move on to the next slide, please. So, the reason why they were set up is avoidable. It's avoidable. What do I mean mission drift is avoidable? Is if I'm set up to help the poor, I can actually help the poor and at the same time be sustainable. But if I find some business said, no, for me to be sustainable, no, I need to go outside the poor. I need to go and get money from the rich. I'm talking about banking now. So that meeting both commercial and social goal is important to financial and operational sustainability, which is critical for organizational resilience. And that the pursuit of the interests of key players, owners, managers, whatever, actually, if you're meeting those interests, that sometimes can seem to be conflicting, you can actually converge those interests in the way you are able to hone, when you hone the skills required, to manage this brand, when the institutions are properly structured, when you look at all kinds of regulatory issues, when you take that as a minimum and all those things, they help you to ensure that you're decent. And you then deal with those five, I was talking Greece, but the Chinese actually brought it out, the Japanese, which mainland Europe adopted in the way in which they mirror their businesses. Okay, now let me move on quickly, just onto the next because of time. I said organizational preparedness, where I put some yellow there. Just quickly flip to that. Organizational preparedness fits into a broader theme of business model. So when you are preparing in advance, the choice of interest rate, adopted approach in credit administration, whether group driven or individual driven, they play a role in how those organizations were able to survive. So I'm talking about microfinance banks. You find that those who use groups tended to survive more than those who were just individually driven. And that tells you about us as humans. God created this world not for individuals, He created us to be together. And because of that, you find that also in practice, the microfinance banks that tended to use groups, they tended to succeed more than those who tended to focus on individuals. And you can always see alignment between all this, what Scripture says, and what actually will then pan out in practice. There was something I did on Andhra Pradesh, where there was a crisis there in India, where they had very, very emergent, actually an emergent thing came out of that study. A key thing that emerges is that failure of microfinance banks globally, and in particular in Nigeria, could not be identified with just a single cause, but that a combination of causes was more appropriate. And then we have to look at the causal factors. But wealth, that I shared earlier, was able to help me to put it. So I said, well, seem to have captured the main issues in all the other theory, particularly as concerned proactive capability required to confront adversity and win the battle, as well as the competent to react to emerging eventualities and shocks, like agility, being agile, being flexible, being innovative, being creative, combined with operationalizing institutional organs. I told you about institutions within and without every microfinance bank. So now move on to some other capabilities. You remember at the first lecture, I actually took you through this table to look at these different capabilities. If you go to the next table quickly, please, you'll see the tables. You know, what are the capabilities? How are they expressed? What were the outcomes? You look at star, you look at night and pretty, you look at, because then and pretty was focusing on planning, proactive preparation. And that what was the outcome? When we found in the bank, they were able to cope with extreme events. Okay, God doesn't was reactive. In other words, how can I survive even when I didn't prepare? Business and continuity. Then to absorb stress, coping. You know, you look at all those, the different ones, and I just begin at this other one spoke about progressivity. Now, can you go to the next table quickly, please? The next table, where I then said business courses, primary and secondary courses of business failure from research on organizational resilience. If you go to that, I have 15 items there. You know, if you look at the 31 banks, 31% of the banks that failed in Nigeria in those 9 years, the original research, not from literature now. Can I move on to that so that people can see that table I'm on now? The next table. Move on to the next. Move on. Move on to the. I just quickly gloss this one. So this one is from the original research. This one is not something you get from the literature. So what happened in that original research in terms of frequency, the teams? We found that 70% of those people who were, because we had people from those banks, we have from NDIC, we have from Central Bank that were interviewed, and they actually said 76% of them said most of the banks failed because of funding and capital. And you know that microfinance, a lot of them were just 20 million capital base, and they couldn't survive when difficulty came. 70%. 80%, it was based on fraudulence. It was actually found that so many of them were actually set up to fail. They were not set up to survive. Those who set them up actually set them up. They put 20 million there. They are able to get a deposit of 1 billion, and they will let it fail. So they will have lost that 1 million, but they get $1 billion. 80%. 80%. That was the biggest discovery, that it was fraud that killed most of the banks. You can look at the others there. Because of time, you can look at the other. It was mostly fraud. This original research, piece of research, and this is being used now, you know, all over the world. The bank was so excited. I mean, the university actually put it on the internet. If you look at number 13, it's also linked to that number 2. Non-performing loans. Who are able to non-performing loans? If you go to Intercontinental, they've changed their name now to Continental. Somebody who took the loan was a chairman of a bank to go and build that place. And he didn't pay back to the bank. And you know the bank, what the name of the bank is. They collapsed, they had to change the name of the bank because new investors came in. Non-performing loans or bad debts. High portfolio at risk, PAT, high portfolio at risk. Portfolio at risk defines what is the percentage of what you gave out that you are not likely to be able to recover. And usually done on a daily basis or 30 days. And you find that the NPL actually can feed into number 2, fraudulent. And it was based on fraudulent, it was based on all these things. There were some other things in there that you can see. Group business model, you see 72% there. Those who developed groups were less prone to fraud, and they tended to survive more. You find 72% there, you know, right in there, within this original piece of research. Now, oh my God, now, I think there's no more time. There's no more time. So let me close with that. The Bible says in Daniel 11:32b, that the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Strength comes from knowing his word, from knowing his principles, from carrying his wisdom, which is a product of grace. I found wealth, the 5 arrows, they align with these godly principles enunciated in Luke 14, verses 28 to 31, and several other scriptures. And those 5 principles, when you use them, robustness, resourcefulness, redundancy, response, and recovery, when you apply them and you use them in the way you anchor your company, you have just some prayers.
Hello, Dr. Emok. I think Doctor has muted his video there. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Osaren Emokpae, double Ph.D. for the seminar work that is started, and this is the 3rd Saturday on organizational resilience, what he's been studying for the past 12 to 15 years, a combination of theoretical framework and practical application, a work of research that we can apply. And we may not be able to take questions for this session, but he's coming back next Saturday, and we can bring as many questions that we want to ask him, so that we can fully engage, because of our time. We need to bring this to a close. But he did a great job in telling us the difference between sustainability, business sustainability as a concept or theory, and resilience. And this is fantastic. And he was able to integrate not just research and theoretical framework, but also scriptures in practical application for leaders of ministry, leaders of non-for-profit, and business leaders. A huge thank you. I don't know why it may be a challenge of broadband. It's just drop off, but it might come back. On your behalf, I want to say huge thank you for this wonderful time, and I want to say thank you for joining us for this all-important conversation. Businesses, you see, we started with a theory that why is it that we don't have businesses in Nigeria going to the next generation, while we have businesses in the Western world and even in Asia. Some of them have been around for the last over 100 years. The Ford Motors, the Coca-Cola companies, IBM, and many others, including what they call them now. It used to be National, now Panasonic, which was set up by Mashishuta Konosuke, a Japanese. So it's important for us to start engaging and start reflecting and start looking at issues and see how we can integrate understanding of scriptures, understanding of theory, understanding of research, and bringing all of these in integration to bear on business practices and leadership for ministry and also for non-for-profit. Thank you once again. We'll come your way certainly, God willing, next Saturday.
So before you go, let me just quickly say, before you go, let me quickly say.
I didn't know you're back.
Yes. I have to take it's a tablet, it's a phone now I'm using. I think maybe my battery went off.
Oh, okay.
So yes. So let me just once again thank you for the opportunity. And sorry, we actually ran beyond time. I apologize for that. But it will be rounded up next week. What I will just do, go straight to the conclusions. That's what I'm going to do next week. So I will just go in and give us not anything to do with this. Okay, I'm sorry. So not I will not go into the study, but what I will give all to take away will not be
Hello. I think Doctor is also having some problem with his connection there, but it's great to read from who you are.
Yes, so you can then run your business successfully. For instance, delayed gratification is one of the major issues that help business in Nigeria to thrive. Delayed gratification came out of the study. Also, there is what they then called also development councils. So I'm going to bring you those original research. It's not just what you read from literature. We came out from my study, which was about 12.5 years. And I will then give you those things. So those banks that are thriving, how delayed gratification helped them, how the behaviors of directors helped, how the what we call development councils, and all these other things. And this you can actually relate on the scriptures in terms of, you know, these principles that they adopted and how those principles have ensured that those businesses are not only sustainable, but they are things that can actually go beyond our generation. That I will do by next Saturday. And once again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osaren Emokpae. We would like to know, maybe we take that on next Saturday, God willing, the difference between if it's the mission drift. You know, he's asking whether it's a highly cerebral presentation. Is mission drift the same as mission modification? And I must say, you know, a word of...
No, they are not.
Okay.
Mission drift is when you just get out of what you were set out to do. Mission modifications is when you do what we call brand extension. Sometimes you look at your brand and you try to extend it. And that is an extension which is allowed in that is why when you go into diversification, is usually you find that modification becomes a part of diversification. You modify it, you can modify a brand based on what is the current circumstance in the market, what is happening. Is my product meeting the need as it ought to be? Is it providing solution? If it's not, you can slightly modify that product, but you are still within the same market. But the mission drift is totally you're out of that market. So rather than giving something to the poor, you are now giving it to the wealthy people. So it's a mission drift. You moved away totally.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emokpae, for that question. You're giving us something to think about, to reflect within a week, that for you to be sustainable, it's important for you to have operational, efficiency. I mean, you need to be sustained in terms of your operation. You need sustainability, financial sustainability, and your brand equity. Thank you very much for all that you did in letting us into branding. I mean, which is some people think it's superfluous or they don't understand it, giving us practical examples of lots. And then the issue of risk profiling. Once again, on behalf of my colleagues and the entire team at Touchstone, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you very much, Dipo Ogundipe. Thank you very much, Miwalabi. Thank you very much, Buki Oluyemi. Thank you for the rest of the team, and thank you for joining us. I want to say that we have more than enough to reflect on, so that when we come your way again on Saturday, God willing, we'll have quite a lot to chew in terms of intellectual as well as practical application of knowledge. Once again, this is Touchstone Business Sustainability. We wish you a wonderful, enjoy the rest of your weekend. God bless you. Thank you. We're bringing this to a close now, formally. Appreciate you. Thank you, Kenny. Well, thank you to everyone. Thank you. Bye for now.